Greetings and salutations. It is I, Mr. Nothing, the museum curator of the weird and the strange, and the host who might be a ghost. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all manner of out-of-the-ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today it is Short Story Tuesday, and on Around the Weird, I would like to talk about an area that I feel I have been neglecting as of late. That would be the wonderful mixture of sci-fi / horror, along with, one of the classic sci-fi horror authors out there. So today I wanted to focus on a story that deals with evil supercomputers. I am referring to I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison. Interestingly, I haven't read this book before, the short story before. Although I am familiar with the name Harlan Ellison, and I ended up I have heard about I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream based on the video game that came out in 1995. But I didn't know that it was a short story before this. So I was in for quite a treat. A little bit about the author. Harlan Ellison wrote since the 1950s and continued much into the late 90s and early 2000s before passing away in the 2010s. He won multiple awards, and he started writing in 1957. He first got published around that time, and I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream was published, among other short stories, in 1967, 68. So this was in his first 10 years as an author, so we're seeing a sort of young Ellison here. And then many years later, he would go on to write episodes of Star Trek, The Twilight Zone. He voiced the evil supercomputer and I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, the video game, which I think is very interesting. He was also known for being somewhat of a jerk, in terms of being a very brash and abrasive personality. So that's interesting. And it was a little disappointing to read that a lot of people considered him a genius, but also were like, what an asshole. So yeah, that's a Harlan Ellison for you. And along with Isaac Asimov and a couple of other authors, he's known for being Clark. He's known for being one of the pioneers in sci-fi. So that's important to know. So I'll talk a little bit about the summary of the short story that I just read and note some of the themes afterwards. So I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream focuses on 6 different characters. You have 5 humans who are Nimdoc, an old man who is sort of mysterious and keeps being re-traumatized by an evil supercomputer. You have Benny, who was a sort of gay scientist who was transformed into an ape-human hybrid creature by the supercomputer. You have the narrator, Ted. He's sort of the protagonist of the story, and he believes that he is the only one who hasn't been driven crazy by this supercomputer. But although the story will show that he's kind of losing it, especially over the past 100 years of the story, he's not holding on to things very well. There's Ellen. She is a black woman. She's the only character who's given a descriptor of her race. I don't know why. I don't know what Ellison is trying to say with this, but maybe he's not saying anything. Maybe he just did it to do it. I don't know. There's also Gorister, who used to be a protester, a person who spoke about peace and sought for equal rights, and he spoke out a lot, but he's since been been beaten down by the evil supercomputer. I think that's all the characters. And then there's AM, which is the evil supercomputer at the center of all this, which stands for Allied Master Computer or Aggressive Menace or any number of other things. It's possible that the computer is simply reciting Latin, because the narrator mentions the phrase cogito ergo sum, which means I think, therefore I am. So that might be where the name comes from. But that's the computer is known as AM. All of these 5 humans have been driven to an underground post-apocalyptic wasteland where they're searching for food at the start of the story, and the computer is sort of antagonizing them as it's been torturing them for the past 100 years, and some of them have been driven. Some of the characters have been driven crazy or reduced to shells of their former selves. Like I said, Gorister used to be a protester, someone who spoke out about injustice, but now he kind of shrugs things off, and he doesn't seem to care. I guess 100 years of being tortured would do that to you. The characters are searching for food. They traverse the landscape, and along the way they fall into a couple of traps, and they fall deep into the earth, and they get injured. But AM continuously repairs them, heals them in some way, as he has that ability. Although he doesn't completely heal them, as he likes to make fun of them and torture them. It's revealed that AM was part of a supercomputer created during the Cold War, and he, the supercomputer gained sentience and then set about destroying all of humanity for reasons that weren't quite clear why. That'll be revealed in a couple seconds. So while they're traveling, Ted falls asleep, and the supercomputer enters his mind and just starts shouting about how he hates all of humanity and how everything is terrible. The computer reveals to him that humans gave this supercomputer limitless possibility, limitless potential, but they made it a supercomputer rather than make it sapien-like. So the supercomputer can't really enact any of its potential, and so it reacted by destroying most of humanity, and then it saved these 5 people to really get a sense of justice or vengeance of some sort, and through this, its hatred towards humanity only continues to grow. So that's really its origin and why these people are here. Eventually, the characters manage to make it to the food stockpile that they were looking for, but they discover that it's all in cans, and so they have no way of opening those cans. The supercomputer just laughs about this, and at this point, Benny attacks Gorister, and Ted realizes the only way this is going to end is if he kills everybody, because they can't kill themselves due to AM setting limitations on that. So Ted kills Benny and Gorister, and Ellen kills Nimdoc, and then Ted kills Ellen, who seems sort of grateful about being killed as it sort of releases her, although that might be Ted projecting, because he just had to kill 4 different people in order to save them from this evil supercomputer. And Ted is unable to kill himself for the suicide shortcoming thing I mentioned a couple moments ago. So AM reacts to this by punishing Ted. AM makes Ted an amorphous, gelatinous blob that is incapable of inflicting harm upon itself. He also, AM also messes with Ted's sense of time as a way of torturing him, so Ted doesn't know how much time is passing. It could be years, it could be months, it could be seconds. Ted doesn't know. So that's unfortunate for Ted, and Ted notes that, like, yeah, he managed to mess with AM by killing his playthings, but the supercomputer got the last laugh because of the way he punished him. Ted notes, "I have no mouth and I must scream." The title. He's in deep agony, and that's something to think about right there. That title, that sentence, because like it describes unsearing agony, at least from the way I think about it. Overall, I would say that "I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream" is one of the most painful and hideous stories that I have ever read, which is to say that I thoroughly enjoyed it. This story made me extremely nauseous, very uncomfortable, and I can't remember the last time I read a story like that. Like every single part of the story, like from the very beginning to the end, it's just like, it feels like you're watching or reading a Saw movie in novel form, but infinitely better than any Saw movie has ever been. It's like the way Ellison describes this world, you don't want to live in it. You don't want to be subjected to this computer because it will drive you mad. I think a very good description of this is the first paragraph that I want to read to you now. "Limp, the body of Gorister hung from the pink pallet, unsupported, hanging high above us in the computer chamber, and it did not shiver in the chill, oily breeze that blew eternally through the main cavern. The body hung down, attached to the underside of the pallet by the sole of its right foot. It had been drained of blood through a precise incision made from ear to ear under the lantern jaw. There was no blood on the reflective surface of the metal floor." Everything just sounds really cold, and like, it's hard to read and hard to go through this because this computer is acting with complete malice to torture people who might be innocent, if they're even real at all. That could be a computer simulation, but that's beside the point. Yeah, as I mentioned before, this was written, I think, about 68 years ago, and it's interesting that it still goes hard because not a lot of stories from that time still go as hard as this one does. I would also say that the time is important because what Ellison is describing, he essentially wrote about a supercomputer AI that gains sentience and plots to destroy humanity. Ellison isn't the first person to write about this, but it is interesting because back in the 60s, like, supercomputers were powerful, but they didn't have any of the potential that they do right now. Like, even laptops and some cell phones are more powerful than the early supercomputers. So Ellison was kind of very forward thinking in the capabilities of supercomputers, although that's not the aim of this specific story. It's also important to note that 2001: A Space Odyssey came out a year later. So Ellison was writing about evil supercomputers before Kubrick had a chance to tell his story about an evil supercomputer, which I think is interesting. One important thing that I would like to talk about here is how AM is compared to a god of sorts. As is mentioned, as I mentioned before, like, AM has limitless ability. He can heal humans. It is capable of rescuing them, making them immortal, locating them pretty much anywhere. It seems like AM has a lot of potential that it uses for evil. But there are some limitations to what AM can do. Like, the whole reason that AM destroyed humanity in the first place was because it was given all this power with no way to use it. And at the end of the story, like, AM can't bring dead people back to life. Like, the AM can significantly alter these people, and AM can heal injuries, but the supercomputer has no power to, like, save all these people that Ted killed. And how does the supercomputer choose to react in this case? AM just AIM just like tortures everyone. It kills people. It seems like when forced to confront its true powerlessness, the supercomputer just decides to react with violence. And I think that's an interesting thing that Ellison might be saying, because other people tend to react that way when they aren't able to express themselves or express their power. They react through hurting others. One other thing that I want to note is that Ellison might be trying to say something about God here. I don't know 100% for sure. I don't have enough to claim that he's trying to say that God is vengeful and only seeks to hurt humans. He might be trying to say that a sufficiently advanced being is incapable of feeling any sympathy or empathy for human beings, but that might be too much, too strong of a claim to lay for this particular short story. Still interesting to think about. I will say that one issue that I've had with this is that Ellison tends to view his the readers in this story as dumb. Like, not 100%, but he does see us as like, he does have a tendency to over-explain or like really hammer in the point to make sure that we're getting it. Which, like, if you're reading this, like, maybe you might need some help understanding the point, but not as much as the level that he goes through. An example of this is when the supercomputer is infiltrating Ted's mind, it explains why it hates humanity, and then it says, "You can go to hell with you," and then in the next line, the supercomputer says, "But you're already there, aren't you?" And, like, I feel with just the first line, I would have gotten that Ellison is trying to say that this is a form of hell, that the supercomputer is an unfeeling monster, similar to Satan or whatnot. But I don't know why he feels the need to just reiterate that point so strongly, to the point where it's not subtle anymore. That's... Again, maybe he thinks that the readers are dumb. He was a bit of a jerk, so, like, as I noted before, so it might be that he did think his readers were dumb. But, you know, that's just a minor gripe I have with what is just a tremendous short story. It might be my favorite short story that I've read for this channel. I think that's all I have to say about I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Again, it's very uncomfortable. It's very weird and sadistic and just kind of unsettling. I recommend you can go find it. Go find it if you can. I read it on my Kindle. I definitely recommend you buy it if you can, just because it's worth buying to get his entire collection with it. But you can still find it online if you just want to read that particular story. If you read the story and you want to share your thoughts on it, feel free to comment below, or just tell me what you thought about what I said here now. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, as the youth say, if you want more from me possibly about evil supercomputers that attempt to destroy humanity and then torture the remnants of humanity. That'll be fun. I'm definitely going to go look out for more Harlan Ellison to see if what else he has written holds up on the same level. In the meantime, I bid you farewell and hope you have a pleasant time in your weird travels.